Hey guys, wanted to do a quick video in reaction to the South Carolina primary and before things happen on Super Tuesday, because Super Tuesday we're going to get a lot of results out of a lot of states and we're going to have a really clearer idea of which direction this primary is going to go. Anyways, in South Carolina, the primary that happened on Saturday. Today is Sunday evening. Joe Biden, we all saw, he won in a pretty decisive victory. We could call it a landslide, being that there were so many candidates, and he almost garnered 50%. So that was a huge showing. And second place was Bernie Sanders, who got less than half of that, only at 20% in South Carolina. So that showed the strength of Joe Biden's appeal. I don't want to say to the African American vote in particular, because outside of South Carolina, there seems to be a lot of black support for Bernie Sanders, but it does show Joe Biden's general appeal to, I guess, the more conservative factions within the Democratic Party, or the factions that want to maintain the status quo, that aren't ready for the kind of change that Bernie Sanders is proposing. So yeah, it's nothing too interesting there. But what ended up happening, the results of it were that Tom Steyer, he had kind of put all his eggs in South Carolina, the South Carolina basket, and he was expecting a great result, but he ended up not even getting 15% of the vote, and so he didn't get any delegates as a result. And so for him, South Carolina was the thing he was depending on, and if he didn't see any result or ROI, return on investment, he was not going to continue. And so he folded his campaign immediately after the results came in. And I guess just as a businessman, that was his decision, that he wasn't going to go further, spoil it for anyone else. He saw that his campaign wasn't the one, and I commend him for that. And then shit got interesting because today on Sunday, and I guess it's good that I waited to do this video, but this is the big news of the day, was that Pete Buttigieg, who went on stage last night, he came in fourth after Tom Steyer. He went on stage last night after losing, after the results came in, and I don't know, he gave like a kind of like moving forward kind of message, not necessarily a message that he was going to drop out. But he switches on that today, and he announces that he was suspending his campaign, which was interesting news. So Pete Buttigieg, I have mixed feelings about. If you've seen my other videos, you know that I was not a fan of his candidacy and his positioning on a lot of the issues, his critique of the progressive movement via his critique of Bernie Sanders. Because it's not that he was mean to Bernie, which is why I don't like him. I could give a shit how anyone treats any one person in particular in these contests, but it was just his characterization of the politics that Bernie Sanders does and the kind of support that he has, the caricature that he created of or helped, he didn't create it, but he helped with that media narrative in terms of labeling us as Bernie bros because we're passionate about our causes, and then using a few, I guess, people online who are horrific to characterize the Bernie Sanders campaign and the progressive movement at large. I really did not like that at all. I didn't like either his characterization of people who believe in a single-payer system for health care as being too far extreme. He's using Republican talking points against those of us who believe that. and I generally did not like his positioning on foreign policy. And look, there wasn't anything egregious, but he never signaled a real change in American foreign policy. There were, there was a meme that I saw, and memes are not accurate depictions of people's beliefs or anything, but it was like something to the effect of Pete Buttigieg can't wait to be the first LGBTQ person to launch a missile from the Oval Office. So, like, the idea is that he's really just there to maintain the status quo of American empire and to continue this war that America's been waging across the world against the struggling people of the world, all to exploit resources and anything for the advantage of the American economy. So there was nothing that Pete Buttigieg said or did to indicate that he was going to change any of that. And for that, I am happy that he's no longer a candidate for the presidency. I don't want to be insensitive to those viewers who see his campaign as a symbol for what's possible in American politics. I think it's fantastic that we now have the first openly gay presidential candidate to earn delegates on a national scale in an American primary process. So that's fantastic. But that doesn't necessarily do anything to change the course of American empire. So yeah, so there are the two ideas. There's one hand that was the good part of Pete Buttigieg, which was okay. He showed with how bold his campaign was, being the first openly gay candidate for president, but then at the same time, when it came to policy, it was full of shit. Anyways, his dropping out, I wonder a lot about it, because just yesterday he was saying, like, he was giving the message that he was going forward, basically. Then today he's signaling, and he threw some jabs at Bernie Sanders in his speech. He said that, like, his movement was one to show that that we don't want to fight Trump with the extremes. We don't have to go to the extremes, or so, I don't know, more of that bullshit that he always says. But there were attacks at Bernie Sanders. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. I'm forgetting where my ramble was going. But I thought it was interesting that he dropped out in such a manner. It feels like he kind of consulted, I don't know if it was donors or people in his ear or connections that he's made in this process, and they kind of saw that Joe Biden is the centrist candidate that they want to support. He's not a centrist. A centrist is someone like Tulsi Gabbard. Joe Biden is a conservative running in the Democratic lane, Democratic Party. But they want to consolidate that kind of vote. They want the more conservative candidate, a la Hillary Clinton. Now they want Joe Biden. Pete Buttigieg was in that lane. Amy Klobuchar is in that lane as well. They wanted to basically consolidate that, and it seems like Pete Buttigieg, said yes, whatever it is, and then dropped out. For him, it's a great political move to drop out. He can now run in the future without having taken a lot of damage on Super Tuesday. But I just don't know. I feel like my generation, we don't buy his shit. Like, we don't trust people like him who don't... we're a generation that's very passionate, millennials. And Pete Buttigieg is a little older than I am. And when I talk to friends of my generation, it's like we're very clear about, like, what it is we believe when it comes to our politics. Like, we have our ideals, we say what our ideals are, whether it's justice, whether it's independence, whether it's freedom, whether it's security. You have what it is that you actually believe in, and like we don't. It's tough to read Pete, so I don't know what his political career is going to be like. I don't think that a growing millennial generation is going, or an aging millennial generation is going to buy into his bullshit if he runs for president in the future. Yeah, so I feel like he was kind of pressured by his donors to drop out, and so that the vote can coalesce around Joe Biden. But the thing is, I don't know if the chips are gonna fall that way. I know I'm going on this tear, like talking shit about Pete Buttigieg, but I know people who supported Pete Buttigieg, and they're wonderful people. Just because you support a candidate doesn't mean I'm equating my criticism of them with a criticism of you in particular. But I just don't think that it's going to be automatic that 100% of Pete Buttigieg's supporters are going to go to Joe Biden. In fact, there were numbers, there were some surveys about second choice, and in two of there were three that I saw. I think Morning Consult was the only one that did not rank Bernie Sanders as one or tied for number one. And Morning Consult, I think, had Joe Biden as the number one that Buttigieg supporters would go to. So we don't know. Like, it might just turn out kind of even, and then we eventually whittle down to Bernie versus some kind of centrist. And look, I think that the establishment is hoping that in a situation like that, it's going to coalesce around the centrist. I don't think it does. I think this is going to look like Trump in 2016. Maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, but I think I think that Bernie's just going to pick up steam and go forward. Now, Pete dropping out made me think about some other candidates who should be ready to drop out. Amy Klobuchar should be one of them, but I think she's staying in just because, Super Tuesday, Minnesota is voting, and she's around number one there. She's neck and neck with Bernie Sanders. I think she drops out on Tuesday. I think she just wants to do this for her peeps in Minnesota, and then that's it. She might, she started her campaign in Minnesota. She might just end it in Minnesota. So, and then the other one is Elizabeth Warren. Now this one's interesting. I have mixed feelings about Elizabeth Warren because I've liked her in terms of where she stood on a lot of issues in the past. She does signal a lot of the maintaining of American empire. She's not really willing to change our foreign policy on a scale that actually does anything to alleviate pain and strife in the world. But yeah, I do like some of her policy proposals. I do like her approach in some regards to politics and getting those policy proposals. But one thing that's turned me off a lot by Elizabeth Warren is, I'm going to adjust the camera, but one thing that's turned me off by her is that she has been signaling that she's been signaling a lot that she is very cozy with the establishment, and not just that she's attacking Bernie Sanders, but the way that she's attacking Bernie Sanders and saying oh, well, that wasn't Bernie's stance on the delegates before. So she's basically saying that if Bernie Sanders only gets a plurality, does not get a majority, that she would fight him not fight him, but she would try to go after the nomination in that regard, and that's why she's kind of staying in the race. And I feel like it's such an insidious kind of move. Why is she in this but to spoil it for Bernie? It doesn't seem she hasn't done well in any of the primaries. It looks like Bernie Sanders is about to take her out in her own state of Massachusetts. Why are you staying in? Drop out. If you actually believe in these progressive ideals and you think your approach is better, fine. But if other people, like the voters, don't think your approach is better, be humble. Just like accept that your proposals are not living up to people's expectations. But she doesn't seem to want to do that. So I don't know if it's this kind of ploy that she has with the establishment. They're like, oh, just stay in this, because the establishment's pretty stupid. They they think that that voters are stupid, and so they kind of see it like, oh, if Elizabeth Warren stays in, she'll just take votes away from Bernie, because, but it doesn't work necessarily like that. I see a lot of Elizabeth Warren supporters already seeing that she is not gaining traction, and they're already jumping ship, and they are jumping ship to the Bernie Sanders campaign. So I don't know. We'll see what happens on Super Tuesday. I expect a big night for Bernie Sanders. I think the state to watch is going to be Texas. It looks like Bernie Sanders is going to win in California, and it looks like he's going to win big in California, which that's a delegate-rich state. The one to watch is Texas because it's also a delegate-rich state. He's neck and neck with Joe Biden, and if he wins and somehow wins in a way that kind of, blocks Joe Biden from getting much of a delegate count in Texas, it's done. It's Bernie Sanders basically, because it doesn't seem after that there will be a path forward for Joe. So I think that's what we're gonna look out for on Tuesday night, and yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit just about the movement within the Bernie Sanders campaign, and I guess the misconceptions that people have of us. After the Nevada win, I watched as cable media reacted. They kind of their minds were like blown. They couldn't believe that Bernie won, and they started to describe Bernie supporters as angry, outraged. They want to destroy the system, all just basically painting us out to be these angry people who are a kind of akin to the Trump supporter, which I don't know. It feels like a lot of sensationalizing. Yes, we are angry. We are outraged about a lot of the things that we've seen politically in our lives. But I also think that anyone who is on the Bernie Sanders campaign, or volunteering, supporting, whatever it might be, I think they're inherently loving to gravitate towards a message of wanting Medicare for all and wanting to make sure that people are getting paid well and that they are able to live the lives that they want. I think there is a humanity in it that shouldn't just be dismissed and shouldn't be glossed over with all these caricatures of outrage and anger that everyone is painting us out to be. Look, there's a lot for us to be angry about, and it's not just on the Bernie Sanders campaign, but the entire country. Those of us who have felt left out, those of us who haven't been necessarily, who haven't benefited off of the myths of American meritocracy, and who actually want to see real change. So yeah, let me leave it at that. There's more that I could get into, but I think I'll leave it for a more personal post later on, or maybe an interview I do with a friend or family member. But yeah, so that's my reaction for the the South Carolina primary, and let's see what happens on Super Tuesday. All right, talk to you guys soon. Later.